Okay, so today we're going to talk with Ron Brothers. He is a dive technician, so he's going to tell us a little bit about his career, his training, how he kind of got here, and then what career opportunities are available to like dive technicians. So, Ron, if you just want to give us a little bit of a background about yourself.
Sure. My name's Ryan Brothers. From originally from Gray, Tennessee. Went to Daniel Boone High School out there. After I graduated, I joined the Marine Corps. Did that for 5 years. After that, I decided to enroll at East Tennessee State. I got accepted there, as well as the University of Tennessee. Chose ETSU. It was the cheaper option, if I'm being honest, and that's why I went with it. And it turned out to be a very good experience for me. Um, I originally went with the intent of becoming a PA, majored in microbiology, and in conjunction with that, I worked at a hospital, getting my healthcare hours and things like that. However, over the course of that, I found out I didn't particularly like the profession. It wasn't what I thought it was. I certainly enjoyed the science behind it, but uh, dealing with the politics and the people that would come in just wasn't me. I wasn't much of a bedside person, and I decided I wanted to do something else, something that not necessarily challenged me more, but gave me a sense of, I don't know, enjoyment, because I just wasn't enjoying it. So I spoke with my veteran affairs representative, and they told me about commercial diving. And so I did research on it. I looked up the statistics. I looked up various schools, what they offered, what divers even do, because I had never heard the profession either. I didn't know it was a thing. And so, as I said, did my due diligence. I found a good school for it. It's internationally recognized. It's got many awards and things like that. And it was the Divers Institute of Technology out in Seattle. And I enrolled, I applied, I got accepted, and dropped out of college and moved to Seattle. And that's how I ended up at DIT.
So, for someone who is kind of interested in commercial diving, are there any kind of pre-requirements, or is there an age limit? I'm assuming like I'm sure there's kind of some threshold that you kind of have to meet to be able to apply to these different schools. So, what are those kind of requirements?
Sure, sure. So the minimum requirements, you have to be over 18, you have to be physically fit, you have to be able to, your body has to be able to withstand pressure. Now, what that means is, particularly from your ears or any other, or your lungs and things like that, you will go through an extensive physical. Like, it's not just your typical annual physical that you go through. It will go through nerve function. It will go through lung function, lung capacity. You will get your ears thoroughly checked by an ENT and things like that. Um, as far as prior experience with diving and engineering and construction, no, you do not need prior experience to that to enroll in the school.
So, is it something that's similar to like filling out a college application, or what exactly does the application to these schools look like? Do you have to write essays or have any kind of test scores or anything?
It varies by school. However, it is fairly simple process. It is FAFSA. You can apply for FAFSA through it. So these are accredited institutions of higher learning. It just depends on the school, and it varies. Through my experience, it was, you basically go to their website, you look at it, decide if that's what you want to do, and then they have an application. It's a simple application, just who you are, where you're from. It'll go through a medical background. It will go prior experience. They give preference to veterans, and other than that, it fairly simple process. You just have to go to each individual school's website to figure out what they want. It's not It's not exactly a standardized system, such as CASPA or the AMCAS or something like that.
I don't know if you know this, but do you know roughly how many schools there are for commercial diving in the United States?
I don't know the number off the top of my head. There's one in Seattle, which is the one I attended. There's one in Jacksonville, Florida. There's one in South Carolina, and there's one in New York. But the one in Seattle is the only internationally recognized, based off of IMCA, and that's the accrediting body for commercial diving institutes. And they're the only one that have been recognized internationally. The other schools do give certifications to become commercial divers. However, it's only through the United States. You can only work in the United States. Our school allows us to work internationally.
Okay, so you said there's like an accrediting body, so I guess that would be a good resource, a good website for students or anyone to kind of go to if they're interested in learning more about the profession. And then I'm assuming they also have like a list of the schools, like you said, just your school in Seattle is the only one that's internationally recognized, but I guess they probably have a list of all of the different schools that are in the United States that people kind of check out. So is that how you found out about the different schools, or did your VA representative kind of help you with that?
I, like I said, I primarily went to each individual school's website and found it out through that way. There's other resources out there as well, but they're more for once you become a commercial diver. There's not a lot of preliminary resources for you to decide. Basically, you kind of have to do your due diligence and go to each school and figure out if it's what you want, because some schools just offer particular trainings in certain things, like to where you'll just get certified in scuba diving or just particular underwater operations like ROVs, remotely operated vehicles, and things like that. So it just depends on what you're looking for, really.
Okay, so that's a website that I'll kind of link with this video when it's kind of posted. But if you could just kind of give people an overview, like what exactly is commercial diving? What can you do with commercial diving? You know, is this more of like you take people to look at schools of fish, or are you really working on heavy machinery? What is it that you're really doing?
So the great thing about the profession is you can do so many things with it. There's jobs out there for divers that I didn't even know existed, and I'm still finding out today. I know through the DoD, NASA, private companies, oil companies, the energy sector, everything. Anybody hires commercial divers, it seems like. You can take a science route with it. I know divers that went to work for the National Geographic, and all they do is or they construct apparatuses for other photographers to come down there and take more professional photographs. I know divers that went to work for Disney and Ripley's, believe it or not, aquariums, and they service the tanks there. The tanks, they service the marine life. I went for the offshore world. Now, offshore diving is primarily servicing the oil and gas industry, and my company is called Oceaneering International. They, like I said earlier, serve Chevron, pretty much all the major oil companies, Shell, ExxonMobil, things like that. They have various rigs out here that either drill or pump petroleum and crude oil products out of the earth. And they need divers to inspect the equipment. They need divers to construct that equipment underwater. Now, diving offshore is seen as a last resort because it is inherently dangerous. There is a lot of things that can go wrong. There's a lot of things that are unforeseen. And it just depends on what you want to do with your career in that aspect. There's also inland diving. Inland diving is more focused on the infrastructure and civil engineering, such as dams, highways, bridges, things like that. You need divers to survey the waterbeds. You need divers to survey and dredge out whatever might be there. And there's also nuclear diving. Nuclear reactors have water cooling tanks around the structure to basically cool it off, and you need divers to service that as well. So, like I said, I mean, and that's just a wave top of all the things that you can do as a diver. It just depends on what career path you want to follow.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. It sounds like pretty much any interest you have, you can kind of follow it in commercial diving. So,
Absolutely.
can you kind of take us through how you become certified? Like once you graduate from your school, did you have a lot of like exams that you had to take? Did you take classes more like college courses? Were you mostly in the water? What does that training kind of look like?
Well, with any technical degree, such as diving, diesel mechanics, things like that, they can only teach you so much. It's more of, like I said, because the industry is so broad, you're going to learn more actually working at what you're working on. It's like, as an offshore diver, I'm going to learn more actually working offshore than I will at school. But however, when I was at school, it was broken down into various sections. You had your introductory courses of physics and medicine, and that teaches you the physiology of the body, going under pressure, how the body reacts to it, what to look out for, various diving related injuries that do happen. Then we moved into lightweight and rigging, and that's basically introducing you to diving in general, like putting on the gear, like this is how you wear it. This is what happens if something were to go wrong. This is what you should do. Then we moved into offshore and hazmat, and those sections were more advanced, as in giving us certain projects to do underwater. They were simple projects, but it's to help you get exposed to what it's like actually working underwater. And with hazmat, it was, responding to hazardous materials, diving in hazardous materials, and things like that. Then we got into welding and burning. That's where basically you do topside first to get you exposed, to get you used to working with welding equipment and burning equipment. And then after that, we moved into the water, where we actually performed those actions in the water. They had weld tanks there. It's not like they put us in just open water to do it. They put us in a controlled environment to where they were able to watch us, make sure we were doing it properly. After that, we moved into scuba diving, so we could get scuba certified, just in case there's not a surface supplied air system for us to dive off of. We can always just put on tanks and put on our BCDs and go down that way. The last phase of training was deep dives, and that's where we went down to 165 feet, and that was to get our international certifications. You won't do that unless you're going for an international cert. After that was our finals. We took a list of finals, and they were hard, but you get through it. And like I said, a lot of it was more like they did tests after every course, but it was also showing what you did in the water as well.
So could you kind of talk about the like different finals that you have to take? And then do you have to take like a big certification test at the end of that, or are those finals the certification tests?
So it's a little bit different from your standard college. The Divers Institute I went to, they service their own tests. It's not, the tests don't come from MCA or the Divers Certification Board of Canada. Those are our accrediting bodies. DIT writes its own exams and their final exams, and I would imagine the other schools do this as well. Now they have to get approved by those accrediting bodies, but those are what they use. And each, like I said, each section came with their own exam afterwards, but it was more based on the practical application of those said courses.
Okay, so you graduate, like you have, it sounds like quite a few different certifications. So then what happens after that? Do people come recruit you? Do you kind of start sending out resumes basically? How does this next step work?
It's really luck of the draw. Sometimes companies will come if they know there's a class getting ready to graduate. They will come and recruit us. For example, 3 months before I graduated, Carnival Cruise Lines came by and they hired a bunch of guys from the course to go work for them. And they got a sweet little gig now where they just go out on cruise ships, and anytime a cruise ship is docked, they service the boat, and when it's in transit, they just sit on the boat and who knows what they do. But yeah, most of the time it's just you figuring out, what you're going to do. You're exposed to a lot of different fields while you're there. The instructors have all sorts of backgrounds in diving. You can pick their brains and figure out what they like, what they didn't like. And if you have a certain interest going in, like I did, um, just figure out what you like, and then just do your due diligence and look up, what jobs are available. They are out there. And yeah, it just depends on your preference, but their companies will come and recruit. My company came as well, Oceaneering International. They came to our school the last month I was there, and they appeared to have the best benefits, and they appeared to offer the most opportunities of exposure in the fields that I want to get into. So it just, like I said, it's a little bit of luck, but if the luck doesn't come, you just make your own luck and find what you want, because it is out there.
Yeah, that sounds like you have plenty of control over where you end up next. So you picked this company and you're kind of working for them now. So when you enter in, are you just ready to start working? Do you have to get additional certifications? So are you kind of at like an entry level and you have to work your way up, or how does that kind of work?
So because I'm a new hire into the offshore industry, you're dealing with two worlds, really. You're dealing with the offshore industry of the oil and gas, and you're dealing with diving. Now, I have all the necessary entry level diver certifications. However, I did not have a lot of the certification it requires to work in the Gulf. So so for my first 2 weeks, I did a whole bunch of orientation with them and getting those necessary certifications, such as Rig Pass. Rig Pass is a kind of an all-encompassing safety certification that involves working on or near oil rigs or oil pipelines and things like that in the Gulf. We also did first aid training. We did what's called the helo dunker. That's basically simulated helicopter emergencies, crash landings, things like that, because you're transported via Louisiana to these oil rigs by helicopter, and those are certain trainings you have to have. We also did a rigging class. Rigging is basically the practice of securing objects for hoisting by crane and moving them to one location or the other, or moving them from a static location to a diver. It just depends. You have to have obviously some intelligence when it comes to working with that, because that is inherently dangerous. We also did fall protection classes. That's basically if you're working at heights, you need to have the proper equipment and you need to know how to wear it. Basically the standard use of that. And from there, that's when I actually get into the specifics of my specific job with the company, which is offshore diving.
So once you get these certifications, do you carry those throughout the rest of your career? Do you have recertification kind of timelines you have to be mindful of?
Oh yeah, there's every certification you get comes with an expiration date. Unfortunately, it doesn't matter if you work every day or if you worked once in that time frame. You have to recertify, and you have to keep up with it. I have a document on my phone that has everything monitored and will let me know 6 months out what I need to get recertified on. And that's everything from the courses I just mentioned for the oil fields, and as well as diving, and as well as company specific training that you have to do.
So does your company usually foot the bill for those kind of recertifications, or those, I don't know if you have to have any like written exams or anything with that, but is that usually you having to pay for all of those, or does your company kind of help out?
So I'm very fortunate. My company will pay for everything to be recertified as long as I am continuing to work for them. I'm very fortunate. That is diver, like personal diver certifications for myself, as well as the golf courses and their specific training as well.
Okay. Is there anything else that you think anyone who's kind of interested in his career field should know about getting into the career, finding schools, the training? Is there anything that you think we kind of missed?
I will say that diving is hard work. It is very hard. It is, um, you have to improvise a lot. You have to be aware. You have to be aware of your surroundings. There is about a million things that could go wrong at any time, and you just have to be aware of that. Now, with that being said, it has gotten very safe. OSHA through OSHA regulations and the Coast Guard regulations, as well as a number of other safety organizations, either through the Department of the Interior, the government, or whatever. Like it has gotten better. However, there are still potential risks. Your body is not meant to go 200 feet below the water. Um, but that withstanding, I certainly enjoy this career. It's like I said, opening a lot of doors for me that really wouldn't have been open if I had continued along the path I was on. Um, I plan on personally, this isn't the end all be all for me. I plan on going into engineering, and probably the best exposure you will ever get to that kind of work while not actually being an engineer. You actually get to see the finished products of what these guys get or girls get to do. And however that is, you get to watch it unfold and you get to participate in the actual construction of it.
That's interesting. So is that somewhat common, or is it maybe like more of a niche thing that you have to know going into it that you're interested in expanding into engineering, or is that kind of common that people start out doing this welding or the underwater diving and then end up going into engineering after that?
I think it's pretty isolated to me. Most of the people I graduated with just want to stay with diving. Like they're fine with just staying with it. And that's completely fine. It's a very lucrative profession if you use it to your advantage. You're exposed to, like I said, you're exposed to so many things you normally wouldn't be exposed to. Me personally, I'm using it as a stepping stone to something else. However, I do really enjoy the profession. It's not that I don't like it, it's that, I just have bigger aspirations personally, is all.
So once you get into engineering, will you kind of stay within your company, or will your company kind of have a place for you to be working doing that? So will they kind of help you obtain that training, or will you have to kind of go on and apply? Do you apply to like undergraduate schools to go to their like schools of engineering, or what's your kind of next step to get into that engineering field?
So they have a agreement with all their employees. If they wish to go down that road, you have to work for the company for 1 year. And then after that year, they will provide tuition assistance for you and basically foot the bill if you sign a contract with them stating that after graduation, you will hire on with them as an engineer. And big deal to me.
Yeah. So what will you do as an engineer?
Say again, you cut out right there.
What will you do as an engineer working like with this company?
So basically, we would be in the of better ways to facilitate helping our customers and type of engineering you want to get into. If you get into the mechanical side, you will basically be in the process of developing better ROV systems. Now, our ROV systems are, basically underwater cameras and things like that to basically do deeper water inspections that divers wouldn't normally get to be able to do. So a lot of pipelines can go up to, 5,000, 6,000 feet below water. Obviously, we can't send divers there. So we need better technology and ROVs to basically inspect these equipments and also eventually assist in the construction of them at that depth. And this company is basically spearfronting that as far as the golf world goes. And they're plussing up everywhere in that aspect. So it's definitely something that's not going away anytime soon.
So I know that some people have some they have some reservations about like commercial diving and these kinds of things because it could affect your life expectancy. Is that anything that you worry about, or is that really a founded kind of concern for people thinking about this career field?
The longitudinal studies on that are it does they do show that being under pressure for extended periods of time obviously cause adverse effects on the body, such as your joints and things like that. I mean, the onboarding of that much nitrogen in your body for extended periods of time is obviously not, you know, what your body was designed to do. But it takes a long time for that to actually take hold. It's not exactly just because you go diving all the time doesn't mean that that's going to happen. It's usually combined with other strenuous activities underwater. Now, if you're going underwater every day and you're thinking that you're the Incredible Hulk and you're going to lift, everything under there and not have any repercussions to that, then yes, like that will cause, adverse reactions later. But if you do what you're supposed to do and you do what you're trained to do, it's not likely that that will affect you down the road if you take care of your body, which is recommended why divers stay physically fit. Most of the older divers that I come across are not exactly a picture of health, and they're smoking and they're eating all sorts of things, drinking all the time, and that has an effect, and that has a significant effect, and that's why they're in the situations they're in. But I've met the best people in the shape of their life were divers, and so it just depends. It's your body and you have to take care of it, and given our profession you definitely have to do that, and if you don't you will pay the consequences for it. And like I said, it just takes discipline and the understanding of what you are doing.
So do you feel like that the regulatory boards and then like even your companies, do you feel that they really take that into account and try to implement some procedures to help mitigate those effects?
Yeah, absolutely. The bigger level companies, and what I mean by that is the companies that are well established, that have been around for decades at this point, and as well as, the inland companies as well, like they practice this as well. They have certain standards and safety practices that they meet. As I said, earlier, as you said with OSHA, uh, there's all sorts of rules and regulations regarding, diver safety, diver fitness, diver, you know, workload and things like that. But as when it comes to the smaller companies, particularly in the inland sector, that's where you run into corners being cut and people getting hurt. But you don't really have to worry about that with the bigger companies and things like that. It's just like any other industry. You're going to find, whatever industry that people decide to go into, you're going to find that there are some companies that cut corners and that has adverse effects. And it just depends. Like, that's why you have to do your due diligence and figure out who is the safest, who is the most effective at what they do. And if a company has been around for 50 years, why? They must be doing something right. And if a company, has, because
Okay, so we just had a little glitch there. We kind of got paused and disconnected. But so we're just going to get back into it. So we were kind of talking about like the training, and then Ryan was giving some advice about the life expectancy and just kind of healthy. I mean, basically just participating in healthy living, being mindful of that, and abiding by these regulations and these rules that are meant to help prolong your life and to prolong your health. So you said in the very beginning, when you start applying to these different schools, that you have to have this more strenuous like physical exam. So do you have that again at any point during your training, or does your company kind of do that, or is it just kind of a one and done thing with that?
So before you go to dive school, they will set you up with a medical exam of that nature. It's a dive physical, that's what they call it. And before you obviously enter school, they're going to do that exam on you to find out if you're physically fit and capable to do that. Um, and then it's done annually every year from that point, unless you hire on to a new company. Each company will want to do a new one on you at that day before they hire you, just to see if anything has changed and just to see, where you stand. It doesn't matter if you had it a week before that or whatever. They are going to want a new physical on you from day one so they can track to see how you are maintaining yourself physically and if anything has changed. That's per our accrediting bodies and as well as company specific.
Okay. Are there any kind of health effects, or any, or not health effects, but are there any kind of health issues that people might be mindful of that could kind of prohibit you from going into this career field? Or maybe if they arise like when you get older, will that kind of cause you not to be able to dive anymore? Or what kind of health issues would those be?
As far as somebody who's never dove before, the things that can immediately disqualify you is obviously any lung issues, whether it be asthma, anything like that. If you're not able to, basically onboard and export nitrogen, if you're the tympanic membranes in your ears, if you are not able to clear both ears properly simultaneously, that will cause issues, and that can lead to obviously adverse effects such as loss of hearing and vertigo and things of that nature. So they want to make sure, that's why they have the ENT there, the ear, nose, and throat specialist, to come there and basically check your ears. They'll have you clear for them. The active clearing is basically performing a Valsalva move and basically expelling the energy or the air between your inner ear space into the outer ear space. When your body goes under pressure, that air begins to basically expand and make sure you don't rupture an eardrum. We call it a barotrauma of the ear if that happens. And that can happen at any part of your body, whether it be your sinuses or your lungs. And those are things which is why they also check your lung volume and lung function to make sure it's operating properly.
Okay, so I guess, are there any health issues that you could develop because of diving that would maybe cause you to not be able to dive anymore, like in the future? Like if you were to switch companies and they reperform this physical, what are the kind of health issues that could show up that then they would kind of disqualify you from diving?
Usually those issues will pop up initially. There's not a lot of chronic things that come from diving long term that I'm aware of. But there are a lot of acute illnesses out there, such as decompression sickness and barotraumas. As I said, there's arterial gas embolisms, there's uh, tension pneumothoraxes, there's all sorts of things that are of acute nature. There's not a lot of chronic illnesses that arise from it. So there's good news in that aspect. It's usually acute illnesses that arise from an improper dive. Either you surface too fast or you held your breath underwater and surface that way, or you overstrained yourself or something like that. Just things like that of that nature.
Okay, so you've really given us like a lot of information about just overall what is commercial diving, the training required for it, what you can do once you are a diver, even going on to other careers such as engineering at this point. So do you feel like there's any like last advice that you need to give that you should give people? What kind of person do you think would make for really good commercial diving? What kind of personality type do you think fits really well with this career?
I would say that you have to like to improvise. There are a lot of situations that arise when you're diving and working on a project or something like that, and you have to figure out how to do it. There's no how-to instruction manual underwater to tell you how to do it. You basically have to figure that out. And if you like working with your hands and doing things like that, um, it's a very good job in that aspect for you. If you like to travel, it definitely opens doors for you to travel. As I said, I've gone from Seattle back to Tennessee. I've gone, and now I'm down here in Louisiana. And as I said, with the international certification, that opens up plenty of doors for me to, and my company's already talking about sending me to Africa, off the coast of Angola. They have a big project out there. There's divers all over the North Sea, and things like that. So, like I said, if you like, opens that up for you. If you also want to get involved in engineering, as I said, that's also a route you can take. And if you want to stay a diver, like you can do that. It just basically depends on you. It depends on what you want to do. I mean, like I said, I know guys who graduated dive school and they went to do something else. It just wasn't for them. But the majority of people that graduated, are with the industry and they love what they do.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it calls for an adventurous spirit. So, I guess one last question that I have is with different areas of vocational kind of careers, they all have these certification tests and these kinds of things that they're going to have to do just to be able to work like in that career. How do you feel like that commercial diving kind of shapes up to, and you might not be able to answer this question, but like for people that are, in welding, like they obviously have to take these tests and certifications and things. Do you think that commercial diving has a lot more certification and testing that's kind of required, or do you think it's kind of on par with other vocational training?
I mean, I don't want to sound biased, but I feel like it has a lot more because we're not just underwater welders. We're not just underwater, construction workers. We're not just underwater engineers. We're not just underwater inspectors. We are all of those things. And all of those things come with certification. If you're a welder, you are certified in welding. Now, you might go off and weld all sorts of things off either in the oil fields or in the construction industry or the civil industries and things like that. But you are a welder. That is what you do. As a diver, it's just one of the many things you're expected to know how to do. You don't have to be perfect at it, but it is a jack of all trades kind of position. You have to be able to weld, you have to be able to burn, you have to be able to salvage materials, you have to be able to understand hazmat scenarios, you have to be able to understand perform inspections such as non-destructive testing, NDTs. And those are all the certifications you get just with being a diver. So it's different in that aspect of, if you're a welder, that's what you are. You're a welder. It's like, well, if you're a diver, you're also all of these things as well. And if you're a diesel mechanic and you work on diesel engines, like you might work on all sorts of engines, but you are a diesel. It's not like you're going to go work on Teslas. You are a diesel mechanic. Like, but with diving, you're expected to, be able to go to a nuclear reactor, to the hull of a ship, to an oil rig, to a National Geographic photography session. Those are all the things you're expected to at least have a baseline and the certification to at least start.
But it sounds like it's definitely worth it because of that versatility.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so, do you have any last words of wisdom or anything for anyone who might be interested in commercial diving?
Do your research and make sure it's what you want to do. It's like I said, it is hard work. I'm certainly not over here saying it's easy. It is hard, but it does pay off. And if you're willing to put in that work, you will definitely succeed in this industry. And it's all on you.
All right. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk with us and tell people who have probably never even heard of commercial diving a lot about this. So I'll definitely link any of the resources that we kind of talked about, any websites with like this video. But I think that you've given us a really good overview of a career that's kind of tucked away. A lot of people don't really hear about it.
My pleasure.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.